338, 4615 divided by 400 minus 1. You actually had a negative 15% real rate of return. Why? Because that's precisely how much less gallons you can buy. Of course, we wouldn't have had to go through it. In this case, big R is 10%. Pi is 20% because the price of gasoline went up by 20%. Each 10% is 25. No, much more than that. 40%. Each 25 cents is 10%. So it went to 325. No, 30%. I'm sorry. Hence, little r is 1 plus 10% divided by 1 plus 30% minus 1, which is precisely the same number. When I ask you, either in homeworks or in a problem, do not calculate the approximate one. Approximate one will be one of the choices in the multiple choices, then don't jump on it. All right? I mean, you have Excel, you have calculators. There's no reason for you not to calculate the exact one. And if you're thinking that's, it's kind of a made up example. If you're thinking that I can actually do something with bonds that's going to give me a real interest rate, you're thinking, no, that's not possible. Is there a way Treasury can actually protect me against inflation? And the answer is yes. These are called TIPS. This is short for Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. For each coupon period, face value is indexed to inflation. So face value for next year is equal to face value this year times 1 plus inflation rate for this year or period. And coupon on T plus 1 assuming this is a semi-annual bond, as almost all TIPS are, is equal to coupon rate times face value at T plus 1 divided by 2. So let's say you bought this bond, and over the next 6 months until the next coupon, inflation was actually 10%. That would be a huge number for US. But if you lived in Turkey, where the latest annual inflation is 65%, 6-month inflation would be about 30%, no, 25% or so. Face value 1,000, but the next face value is going to be 1,250 if there was 25% inflation. Or if there was 10% inflation, next face value is 1,100. So your next coupon is going to be higher. And at maturity, you will be paid face value at time T. Well, T is the number of coupons, big T. So it's indexing your face value to inflation. In a normal bond, you get only $1,000 at the end. So if this is a 30-year bond and you got 100% inflation during those 30 years, which is not abnormal, uh, you're going to get 2,000 instead of 1,000. And every coupon period, you're going to get increasingly higher coupons. Uh, but the coupon rates tend to be smaller. For example, let's do CNBC. Let's look at the rate for US 30-year tip. The current yield on that is 2.07. This is the real yield, okay? And coupon of this bond is 2.125. On the other hand, the regular bond, 30 years, it has a yield of 436 and it has a coupon of 425. But that 425 remains constant. Every year you're going to get $42.50 of coupon on that bond. But on the other one, you're going to start low. You're going to start about 20 plus dollars. But every 6 months, it's going to go up based on inflation. Just to give you an idea, I had downloaded this file for my other class. I'll show you where to get it, but since I already have it, let me see, it was, I think, this lecture. Yep. This is the data for CPI since 1947, okay? And here I found out what was the CPI in the beginning of February 1994. That was 146. What was it at the end of, January? It was 309. So a face value of 10,000 has become 21,000. So if you had bought that bond back in February 1994, right now government is going to pay you, assuming a face value of 10,000, $21,110 instead of just 10,000. So you were protected from any inflation. Now, there is a so-called break-even inflation number. Let's calculate that. Current nominal 30-year bond yields 4.36%. I'm just going to round it. And 30-year tips, let me make this bigger. Yields 2.10%. What is the so-called break-even inflation rate? Is basically implied inflation rates between these two bonds. So let's call that B pi equals 1 plus nominal divided by 1 plus real minus 1. So 1 plus 4.36% divided by 1 plus 2.10% minus 1. That's 2.21%. Now, if you believe, suppose you are of the belief that over the next 30 years, average inflation is going to be above 3%. I can't fault you for believing that. There's no price to having faith. But if you're wrong, market is going to exact it eventually. What do you need to do? Do you buy the tips or do you buy the nominals? The break even is 221. You believe it's going to be 3 or above. Which one is going to be better for you, given your belief? Just pick one. 30 tips. Why do you think so? Yeah, because the equivalent tips, that is the current nominal, should have a yield of should implies that inflation is 221. You're going to be compensated for an average inflation of 2.21. But if it's going to be 3, you're going to be compensated a lot more than that. That means tips is cheaper than what it should be. So you go buy the tips. If you believe it's going to be below that, you buy the nominal. That's why we call this break-even inflation rate. There's even actually a data on that. And if you go to, not that one, Fred St. Louis, this is Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and they have an economic database. FRED is short for Federal Reserve Economic Database. And search for break-even inflation.